Hey y'all. All right, I'm getting off the phone.
All right.
Hey everyone, this is Delegate Sammy Brown. We're doing our live panel tonight with some of my very favorite people. So we decided that we are going to attack some of the dynamics here locally head on, especially when it comes to race dynamics, intersectionality, and then of course, racial justice. So there's a number of guests on today. We'll be here in 20-minute segments. I've got with me Jennifer Wells, please wave hi, my good friend. Adonijah Gilmore, say hello. Corey Roman just got elected, say hi, my friend. Then below we have the fantastic Tina Gray Russell, running in Mercer County, super proud of you. And then two of my colleagues, Sean Hornbuckle and Danielle Walker, delegates with me in the House here in West Virginia. Here in a bit, we should have some additional folks that will be joining us to also talk about their spaces in other states for those that are also navigating racial justice there in the ground. We'll have our YDA Black Caucus chair to join us, and we'll also have a candidate running in Milwaukee. So very relevant to the conversation. So let's kick this off with the state of play with Jennifer Wells. So let's do this. And Sarah, let's move folks backstage. So we've got Jennifer. Thanks, Sarah. Straight up, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Sammy?
Good. Do me a favor.
What's that?
I know all your accomplishments, and I know what you mean to this movement space, but why don't you tell the folks watching who you are and what you do?
Okay, not a problem. So I'm Jennifer Wells. I am actually, this is a significant weekend for me. I'm a native New Orleanian who was transplanted, not by choice, to West Virginia 15 years ago, right after Katrina, because that was that's my lived experience. I chose to remain in the state because of the wonderful support and surrounding that I received, me and my family both received when we arrived here. And I stayed, and as I became the Jennifer Wells that some folks know right now, right? I'm introducing myself, but for those that do know me, the person that moves and in spaces that I move in now for justice, racial justice, gender justice, economic justice, was kind of born 15 years ago. Really stepped into my voice and power at that point. I went on to get my master's degree in social work, worked out in the field, got experience, got to talk to rural West Virginians about what medical health care is really like and what's lacking, supported youth in our juvenile justice system, which needs to be dismantled and rebuilt, if rebuilt at all. We need to build supports and services, not jails or placements, and moved on to direct organizing with West Virginia Healthy Kids and Families Coalition in 2015, and worked in youth leadership, worked on public health care campaign statewide, and then assumed the directorship in 2018, which I just left that position to join a space that I needed. Right, I love West Virginia. I still live in West Virginia, but I have now joined a national organization, Community Change, and I will be a senior organizer that works specifically supporting Black-led and Black women-led organizations in the Southern region, and I still keep Appalachia as a part of my territory. So I get to still work and support and build power here in West Virginia as well. So that's me.
Hey, just right off the bat, I think folks that are watching and taking this in from home, you should see right away why it was imperative that I have Jennifer Wells here with us this evening. And one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about in particular, because you and I have navigated movement spaces for a long time, and it has been particularly, I think maybe in the past year, like many folks, where we decided that the focus isn't this broad swath anymore. It's very much around how we're going to affect the injustices within our communities, particularly around racism. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted to really discuss with you is the current state of play. What does it look like in the movement right now? What does it mean to join an anti-racism movement? And what does right look like if you want to lead in this space as an activist?
Okay, so the state of play, and some of this is going to be my personal experience in the movement, as well as my perspective and in some ways my opinion. But I personally believe my opinion is right, so I'm gonna flow from there.
I love it.
Right now, we have moved from a space of conversation and politeness, where in the past we thought we could affect change by being in rooms and sitting at tables and talking through a lot of policies or decision making, right? But even as we were creating spaces and tables, we were still leaving people out. We were not very inclusive, right? It really wasn't authentic and it wasn't intentional. And so what we are experiencing now in what feels uncomfortable, and here's what folks have got to get comfortable with in order to create change, it's not going to be a day at the park, right? We're not going to be walking through the tulips together. That is the North Star, right? We want to build a world where everyone thrives, not just survives, not just gets by, but that everyone thrives, right? And for me, as a Black woman raised in the South, to thrive, I have to have systems in place that respect me and open space for me, right? And no, as I know that we're dealing with the 100-year of the suffragette movement, right? The right to vote, but I have to say this, and again, I'm labeling a lot with my personal opinion. Yeah. I don't consider that my right to vote. That wasn't my day. That's not my day, right? Mm-hmm. I'm pleased that we had a movement and change in this country, but we have to buttress that argument or that celebration with the idea who actually got the right to vote. And that to me seems to play out a lot through American history. We celebrate days. We love to celebrate in America, right? We love to say that we have gotten it right or we're getting it right without talking about the hard truths. And what we're facing in this moment, particularly in movement spaces, is that there is a level of non-acceptance of half truths anymore, right? We are not accepting only a certain group getting their rights or being able to thrive. We are at a moment where we can't wait any longer. Time is a white supremacist concept, right? And oftentimes when folks are asking for change or demanding change, they're often met with the conversation, well, if you would just be patient, right? You would just have more conversations. If you just give us time to adjust. Who's asking for the adjustment, right? Who's actually asking for the adjustment? The person that's typically asking for more time and for the process to take a little bit longer, or for us just to see see a better way, is typically the person that's also on the side of privilege in that moment, right? They're the person that's receiving all of basically the good intention of whatever is happening right there. And so the folks that are in the margins, the folks that have constantly been excluded from the conversations, constantly not given a seat at the table, are now speaking up and saying no more. And moderation, while we can understand and respect moderation in certain degrees, when it comes to my life, when it comes to my ability to thrive and to live, I can't moderate that. That has to be a change that has to happen now. And so we're no longer holding patience for stalling, right? We're not, the civil rights movement is not going to be stalled. The social justice movement that is asking for inclusion and equity for all, we're not going to wait on us. We're not going to be stalled anymore. We're not going to be put in a waiting room. We're not going to sit peacefully and decide that the folks that were actually asking to release power, we're not going to believe that they can have a conversation about releasing power. No one in power is going to release power. And you know how I know that? Because I myself have sat in privilege and power, and I know I didn't want to give it up. I tell this story of a trip that I took to London with my family in 2004. It was a trip. I grew up with a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money. Taking a vacation was not something that was even in our world when I was growing up and when I was younger. I finally was working at a job that I could afford to do this. I took my mother to London. It was me, my mom, and my brother. We're walking around the Tower of London as tourists. We are fabulously celebrated there. They love, at the moment, they were celebrating black, brown skin. Like, folks didn't immediately think that we were American. When they found out we were American, they wanted to know more about where we were from. My mother was surrounded by a group of tourists from Sweden. My brother and I were talking to folks from France, and it felt good. There was a sense of relief in walking the streets of London, if you can imagine this, that we did not have as Black Americans in our own country. I watched my brother, who is very much an artist, very much into art, in a museum, turn to us and say, which is something that the Black American knows very clearly. We survey a room, we survey a situation and a circumstance just to know that we are going to be safe. Yeah. The basic part of living as a Black American is actually trying to figure out where you're going to be safe. Higher arching goals, that comes after that. Like, literally, I have to know if I'm walking in a restaurant, if I'm going to walk in a movie theater, if I'm going to walk in a classroom.
The hierarchy of needs. It's the very
it's the base. It's the baseline. So just surveying a room and surveying whether or not you're going to be safe. My brother turns to me and my mom and quickly says to us, "We're the only Black people in this room." That was something that even in my heightened sense of security, I hadn't even denoted because I was that comfortable. I know he, as a Black man that's 6'5", that has to walk the streets of America all the time and be viewed as a threat, did not have that luxury. And so when I looked at him and I said, yes, you're right, there are just us here as Black folks and people of color in this room. Does it matter to you? And he said, no. And I watched his shoulders release. I watched the physical comfort roll over his body. It was physically present in how he stood and how he breathed, how he talked, and how he was for the rest of the day. That is not something I watched or experienced with him in America. Now go back to the Tower of London. So we're walking around, we're feeling good, we're comfortable. There was a white family from America. I'm not sure where. I didn't ask them, didn't really care. Mm-hmm. They were not being treated as well as we were being treated. We were kind of the favored group in the tour group, and it could be even deemed tokenism at that point in time, but we were getting treated pretty well. We were getting pushed to the front. We could see what we want, move in the group how we wanted, navigated how we wanted. I was taking a picture of my brother with the London Bridge behind him. The gentleman, and I knew this because I'm empathic, and I also have to add that that's something that people of color, particularly Black folks, have to be. We have to have like 6 senses. We have spider sense. We have to sense the temperature of the room. We have to sense what our safety is going to be. We have to sense the mood of folks and how it shifts, because again, that's a threat to us. Mm-hmm. The gentleman came over to us, and I could hear in his voice, he just wanted to connect. I'm Southerner. I know how that is. I have Southern hospitality running all through me. I know what that's like to welcome people, to make people feel welcome and wanted. He wanted to engage with my family because he did not feel welcome by the group where we had a privilege. He did not. The first thing that ran through my mind when he approached us was, if we were in America, would you talk to me? Would you talk to me? If we were in America, would you want to be in my company? And so in that moment, I remember thinking, with my privilege, I don't want to share that with him. I don't want to offer him comfort, and I'm not going to lose my place being seen talking to him. I'm telling you, this is how petty I was at that moment. I'm like, I'm not going to be seen by these folks that are treating me well talking to you. And I say that, and I tell that story often because I know how hard it is to give up power and privilege. It's not an easy thing. And so what we're seeing in this movement is, we're not going to wait for you to come to the place in your mind where you can offer us inclusion. We're taking inclusion. We're going to demand inclusion. We're going to thrive. And what that means is systems that folks have been functioning in are not going to survive in the way that they are now. And that's okay. But I know that's uncomfortable for folks, right? It's uncomfortable for people to think that how they've lived their life and systems that they've evolved in and places that they've gained privilege and operated in on a daily basis, how they've raised their families, how they've lived their lives in their communities, is suddenly going to be upended. But if we want a world, and when we are taking care of everyone, everyone thrives. that we have to get to that point. So I hope I've answered to some degree where we are in this movement, but it's the fact that we're not stepping back. I love the young energy and the organizers that are coming up, that are taking over, that are strategizing on the street, like extemporaneously, right? We train, we learn in the back room, but right now they're putting some of their skills to use in the moment, and they are winning, right? We're winning. And it may not seem that way, but there's movement.
I definitely think that one of the big takeaways from this conversation is that the reason that this movement space feels so aggressive, the reason that it feels like there's so much unsettlement, if you will, is because when we're making that type of systemic change and you have to literally rip down constructs, you don't get the luxury of incremental change. You don't get the luxury of transitional spaces. So I think that's actually, it's very pertinent to a lot of the commentary that I'm seeing right now, which is, why are they doing it this way? Why can't they just be like that? And it's almost as if there was a revisionist history that was told to these folks, as if we didn't have to be in volatile spaces before to get what we had. I think my last question for you, Jennifer Wells, is the performative ally component that I know kind of unsettles the both of us, but to hear it from you and to articulate it, what does that do to a movement space when folks have kind of taken on that role, and then maybe define it? Maybe I'm not defining it for folks the way that they need to hear, so they understand there's a little more to this work.
I tell this. I'm going to tell a story again. I speak in stories, and so and typically they're personal stories. So bear with me for a little bit. Mm-hmm. A wonderful organizer that I admire, who is much younger than me and braver and stronger than me, Takaya Smith, in 2014 gave me my first Black Lives Matter T-shirt in 2014, and that was the first time I ever owned one. She gave it to me, so actually it was a gift. For the years that have passed since 2014 till now, even up until May of 2020, that T-shirt has been in my drawer. And whenever I touch that T-shirt to put it on, it's not like any other piece of my clothing. I have to actually go through in my head where I will be to judge how I was going to be received in the spaces where I wore this T-shirt, and whether I was ready or prepared to deal with the consequence of wearing this T-shirt. Because you see, a Black Lives Matter T-shirt in December of 2019 was not well received in spaces. Right. And when you were wearing it, you were standing up, and you were standing in solidarity, and you were standing for what's right, right? That all lives basically matter, because Black lives have to matter, and they have not mattered up until now. We see it on a daily. To now see folks flagrantly, and I say this without regard because it's almost to the faddish point, right? To wear that T-shirt is not to hold that T-shirt in the same way that I, as a Black woman, looked in my T-shirt drawer and looked at that T-shirt, right? It's to think about the consequences of standing up for my rights, to be unapologetically Black in American society. It is to say that I will not stand for any oppression of my people. It was all in those letters, right? It was all in that shirt. What we see now when it comes to performative allyship, it's showing up, it's screaming Black Lives Matter, it's screaming other things in moments without being fully informed about the history, about the struggle, and actually sitting down and talking with Black people and brown people about what this struggle is really about and what we really want, right? I want to wear my Black Lives Matter T-shirt. No, never doubt that. I want justice. I want voting rights. I want to be able to buy a house in a neighborhood without wondering whether I'll be rejected outright, whether my price will be different, whether the bank will even loan me the money to purchase the house. I want to be able to work without having to survey where I'm walking into and what spaces I'm walking into. There is a Black agenda. We want economic freedom and justice. We want a social justice. We want racial, gender justice. It's a lot more than being able to freely wear a t-shirt. And now that we freely wear the t-shirt, please don't think that my fight or our fight is over. And when folks one big celebratory moment arrives, and our performative allies tend to run into that moment, sing and wave in that moment, parade in that moment, and then they go home to their lives because they don't have to walk in this skin, and they don't always have to walk in the social parameters that Black and brown people have to. And so it's forgotten. And in a way, I can't expect it not to be, because you don't experience it on a daily. So you don't know how deeply it goes. It hurts the movement when that energy enters a space. It takes energy away from the fighters. We have to now sit and become the educators. We have to pamper. We have to console, or we're expected to. I'm not saying that we do it, but we're then expected to console, to make people feel better, to assuage guilt. That is not my job. I'm not claiming guilty. What I'm claiming for is I want justice. And so, are you going to help me work for justice? Are you going to get down in the trenches when it's not going to look cute? And I'm not talking about having a fight at your Thanksgiving table. It goes a lot deeper, as to how we're going to get this justice and how it's going to arrive and the fight it's going to take. It's not going to be pretty, and it's not going to be comfortable. But I feel for the folks that are performative, it means a lot to take the picture. But it doesn't mean a lot that after the cameras are over, that you're going to sit here and still do that work to make it right. It's going to take a whole lot more than a moment to get this country and this world to the place it needs to be for everyone to thrive. And I'd say that the biggest takeaway is that performative allyship sucks so much energy away from the movement. It just does. I don't have time. I don't have time to pamper somebody. My life is at risk. My brother, my husband, my family's lives are at risk. I don't have time to sit down and say that it's going to be okay. I don't know. My belief, my dream, my vision, because we also have to be aspirational in this work, is that the North Star will be reached and we will be okay. But from here to there, it's going to take a lot, and I'm not sure what that journey is going to look like. And you're going to have bumps in the road. You're going to have to deal with it. And we're not always going to agree, and that's okay. We have to learn how to have good conversation where I'm not responsible. Black people are not responsible for bringing everybody up to speed about where they should be and how they should understand this work. So
drop the mic, sister.
All right.
Drop the mic. It means a lot to have you on. Just in general, I've loved working with you. You are a sister in arms when it comes to this movement space. But for me in particular, to hear you say these words and to really put out that this moment is pivotal for actual livelihood, sets the tone for the urgency of the rest of the conversation. And I know you got to be on another call. So.
Well, can I say one more thing just to add to it? I learn. I'm a student. I will be a student all of my life. I love that. I love the fact that we are constant learners. And a conversation that happened last week that it just rocked me, and I felt it. It resonated with me so much. And in this country's history of movement work, and particularly racial injustices, is the fact that we're in what we can deem a third Reconstruction. And we shouldn't be surprised by the uprisings that we are experiencing, because these are very much similar to what happened right after the Civil War, and the North pulled out of the South, and white supremacy started to really take hold because they had to tap down, literally depower a mass of people that were ready to thrive and ready for freedom. It happened again in the civil rights movement. We had Obama elected in 2008. And I sense, even as I cast my vote for him as a president, I did that, was that this would awaken something that needed to be awakened. I'm not saying that it shouldn't, but that it would awaken a whole new energy. And we are seeing it now. Right? That anger, the built up frustration of the oppression, and also from the oppressors. And so that this indeed is the third Reconstruction that this country is experiencing. And my hope is that we get it right this year, that we get it right this time, that we don't pat it down, take small wins and make them, conceive them as like the ultimate North Star and the goals that we were working for, that we continue to strive, because we will not be calm, we will not be satisfied, we will not be happy as a country. This country will be at no peace until we all are at peace. And that means we're all thriving.
Perfect. Thank you, J-Dub.
Yeah.
Everyone, Jennifer Wells from Community Action. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Sarah, let's bring on Sean, Addie, Corey, and Dontavius.
Good evening, everyone. How we doing out there?
Yeah.
Good. How are you?
Doing well, doing well.
Where's Addie? Sarah, we need to add Elijah Gilmore. There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
All right, gentlemen.
Was it me?
All right, gentlemen, there is a very real reason why I want to make sure you were on this panel with us. And then, of course, you know, I have a special guest co-host in Sean Hornbuckle today. But I would be remiss if we didn't talk about recent dynamics. We just got out of a protest action on Friday, Addie and I, and then we wake up over the weekend and see all the events that transpire around Jacob Blake. And it's become apparently clear that it's not just Black and brown bodies. At this point, they're very much targeting Black men. And I want to be able to facilitate this conversation for us to steer right into it, particularly because we're all individuals that lead in our respective spaces. But I want to kick this whole thing off. And while you're doing your introductions to let folks know who you are, I want you to be thinking about, how do you show up as a leader in this space, knowing that you need to represent individuals that don't look or sound like you, and quite frankly, have made you their target. So let me start with Sean, and we'll start our introductions.
So I definitely appreciate the opportunity to be on here and help you do a little bit of hosting, Sammy. Out there, Sean Hornbuckle from Huntington, West Virginia, serve in the House of Delegates with the lovely Sammy Brown and Danielle Walker. You know, I'm a financial advisor by trade, but very passionate about education, economic development, and these issues that not that we're going with today, but that have reared their ugly head again, and trying to make sure that we curb this ugly thing and stomp it out as best as we can. So again, just sort of excited to be here and want to hear from you, gentlemen.
All right, wonderful. Addie, thank you.
Sure. First of all, I'd like to say it's always important to regard reverence here, and it's amazing to be with fellow freedom fighters. It's refreshing, it's encouraging, it's inspiring, because these turbulent times are as real to us as it is to you know, to anyone who's paying attention. So my name is Antiracist Gilmore. I'm a master's level social worker. I've lived here in Martinsburg for pretty much all my life, briefly in Clarksburg. I graduated from Shepherd. I got my bachelor's in social work from Shepherd, and I got my master's in social work from WVU. So that experience has a little bit, actually a lot of it, really kind of helped and supported my consciousness, because you can really connect race to poverty, to economics, to, you know, macro, to meso, to social, to micro. You really see it in all the dynamics, in particular with racism. You know, you see it, you know, deeper than just on the end. You see it deeper than just George Floyd being, you know, murdered like that or executed. You see the delay in arrest. You see the cover up. You see everything about the system in itself that allowed this disease of racism to continue. So, you know, and that happened in our own community. So it's you know, with that experience of being a social worker, it really has helped me with my consciousness. But I'm glad we have each other, you know, to talk tonight, because it is deep, and I don't know if you know, people of goodwill or you know, allies know how you know, particularly dangerous this freedom fight is, and the level of uncomfortability that we are going to have to engage in order to get it right this time.
I'm with you.
Dontavius.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you for having me on. It's always, in light of the times that we're currently in, it's important that we do have these conversations, these real heart-to-hearts, so that we can formulate a path that actually gets us to equity, and actually receive justice. And so I'm appreciative of you inviting me to be on. My name is Dontavius Gerald. I'm the chairman of the Black Caucus of the Young Democrats of America, but I'm also a Democratic nominee for state rep for the 25th House District here in Ohio. And, when I think about my time, even prior to running for office, a lot of the work that I did was related to mental health and addiction policy in particular. And so I always was in rooms talking about health disparities. And I was talking about racial trauma before it became something that has been phrased or used in the rooms across this nation, looking at racism as a public health crisis. And so when I think about every facet of my life, but also the individuals I work with and talk with, who've been in the unfortunate cycle of addiction, what you see there is housing inadequacy, food insecurity, trauma from a myriad of different issues, on top of what we're seeing in the media, on top of how they're being perceived in schools, on top of the conditions of their communities. And so, as Addie said, this is a whole list. This is a person-centered issue that we have to address on every single front. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation to really begin to figure out how can we begin to address the whole person in our approach, in our pursuit for freedom. So thank you all for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Boy Roman.
Hello. As stated previously, I want to thank you all for having me in this space. Just a quick note. I am diagnosed social anxiety. So when I come into certain spaces, I feel a certain way already. But when my racial chip, so to say, that has been placed on my shoulder by people that are my own, as I am a mixed race person, it's hard to do. But when I come into spaces like this, where I know that I am surrounded by like-minded people that have true striving and goals and actually want to make a plan so that people that look like me and people that look like yourselves can have spaces like this to speak their mind, I think that is keenly important, so highly important. I'm Corey Roman. I was just elected to the Martinsburg City Council. And it is, as Sammy said, I want to thank you for that, but I was also the first Black elected in our city's history. And I think that is a triumph, but at the same time, I think that is a very sad point to be making in 2020. The area is known for prominent Black folk. It just truly is, the whole area. So I'm just, the fact that it took to 2020 to get somebody into the office that looks like me, looks like my peers, is very astonishing to me. But we can make progress on it. There's no time in this day and age to sit still and wake in any moment of rejoice or moment of despair, because it is time to activate and bring our people together for real. There's no time to wait. What it looks like to me, I'm really close with our city officials. What it looks like to me is holding these people accountable. And what that means is I have our chief of police's number. It means giving that information and that whole solid look outside to the other people, that you can show that they have somebody that truly represents them, that looks like them. And it means getting people onto different boards. I talked recently with Addie. I want to get him on the Human Relations Committee for the city. It is getting people that look like ourselves to represent us on all levels. I know that the city level is really small, but my city is no stranger to the things that have been happening across this nation. As many people know, we tragically had a brother gunned down in the streets of my home city, shot over 20 times, and he had no weapon as a gun, so to say, on him. It's time for change, and it's time to start at every single level. So, I mean, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be with all of you. You are all smart, individually minded people. I mean, it's time to move forward. We got to bring ourselves together, and we got to push. So, I mean, I'm glad to be in this space.
Absolutely. And I want to make sure that that I brought this collection of folks together very specifically because I do deeply respect you. You know, I say this often. There would not be a Sammy Brown in the House of Delegates if there weren't a Sean Hornbuckle 4 years prior. And that said, I want to go ahead and open up this conversation with that scope. So take it, Sean.
Appreciate that. So, you know, and congratulations again, Corey. That's awesome. And I'll sort of have you lead off, and I want to hear the other two gentlemen. You know, with being Black males that are in leadership, if you all can just sort of speak to your experiences in navigating that, again, being in leadership from that position, as there are certain pressures from different communities, whether it be the community at large, or maybe specifically the Black community, or you know, a non-color community. Can you all talk to that?
Yeah. I thought it was for Corey. I thought Corey was gonna.
Did you want me to start that off? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Just get
mainly,
in there.
I mean, from people of my own color, I haven't gotten a lot of outpour. It's sad to say that, I mean, Addie can back this, and I'm sure Sammy can. In Martinsburg, there is a faction of Black folk that are politically active, but if we got the even more larger crowd that we have politically active and woke, then they would be charged up on many things. So, I mean, what it means to me is representing everybody as I see them. I mean, I fight for the working folk. I mean, it means bringing up these hard conversations when we have folks coming into these spaces. Just like a couple weeks ago, we had a cable provider. I mean, it may seem minuscule to people, but we had a cable provider come in, and they were asking to set up service in Martinsburg. And I was all for it because I am completely for expanding broadband and everything on that aspect. But I also asked them if they were going to be able to support low-income families the way that some of these larger companies can. I mean, and what that means to me is when I think about the working class folk, I think of all of our people, but the black people are in my mind completely. But when I'm on the working class level, that's who I think of. And I'm not worried on pressures from outside groups. I'm sure my brothers can attest to that as well. The pressures, you do feel them, but you just have to do everything that you know that is right for your folk, because that means it'll be right for all folk.
Yeah, lucky on that.
Yeah. I would have to agree. It's always, you know, important to, you know, consider obviously perspectives and construction from, you know, in some regard from outside people. But I think the ultimate, you know, battle that we're in right now is it goes much deeper than racism. It's spiritual. I feel, in a sense. It is about right and wrong. So, you know, leading or being considered or regarded as a leader in some form in the community, it looks dangerous now to me as a Black male. It's always been dangerous because I've been trying to always become more awake, because I don't even consider myself woke, even though I do, I have, self-educated on a lot of topics, issues regarding history, and even aware now. But there's always a learning experiences that you can have, and there's always people that can elevate and expand your mind. But after Sammy and I was able to attend a protest that she had mentioned, or a rally, and it was it was in Berkeley Springs. I'm sure people heard about it. It was live streamed. You want to check it out. Malcolm Newman, you can want to check his Facebook out. You can see the video. But it was everything confirmed that you see in the horrors of the street. It was as peaceful as possible on one side. There was no rioting, there was no looting, there was no kneeling during the national anthem. There was we established a lawful permit and occupied the space lawfully and peacefully, and was still met with the same type of hostility and on the brink of a slaughter, if we want to be quite frank with you, a slaughter that close, because the mindset, the spiritual battle that is being lost with some allows you don't care, you dismiss any type of conversation because of multiple things: fear, class, rape, miseducation or uneducation, but more so just not giving yourself permission to even consider someone else's plight or difficulty or experience or perspective. So it's more dangerous now, Sean, to answer that question as a Black male leader, because I knowing what we know about leaders who engage in these type of spaces and tell the uncomfortable truths that is necessary to be heard. It represents a certain type of danger and risk.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, even in that question. What I would like to do is kind of talk about it from two frames of thought. The first, with the hat that I have as the chairman of Black Caucus, I'm blessed every day to have an amazing team that works with me to empower, continually empower the individuals who are who look like me, look like us on this in this Zoom, in this conversation, who are on the streets, fighting, running for office, raising money, fighting through policy. And our organization really is a space, or our caucus is really a space, a safe space to re-energize people, because we know this work is not easy. In fact, a lot of our individuals who are in leadership positions don't have the appropriate self-care. And what happens over time is these individuals burn out, and then we don't have a bench. We don't have we don't have someone following in the footsteps of those who unfortunately may just kind of call it quits. And so, what we try to do as a caucus is really create that safe space where folks can recharge, have a conversations, strategize, so that they can go back out there in the work that they do and be their greatest selves. Right. And so I'm honored and appreciative and just humbled by the fact that I have the space to help individuals who's doing that work. And then I'm going to put my other hat on as a Democratic nominee, as future state representative. This is I know that I represent a minority majority district, and I know that there are individuals who don't necessarily have the same philosophy as I do. And one of the things that is really interesting as I navigate this space is really how much work it requires for you to stand firm in your faith and in your spirit of knowing that what you're doing is the right thing, even when it's hard. And I can't tell you how many times I've had really difficult conversations with people about policy, and individuals having various perspectives, and having to really just say at the end of the day, look, I need your voice with me at the State House. And so even if you have a different perspective than I do, your voice with me can make this bill better, make this policy better, or make the action that I would like to see happen better. But one of the biggest things I find, which is really interesting, and Addie talked about this a little bit, and I want to expound upon it, is that we don't have our communities, again, to layer through systemic racism as a foundation of what I would like to talk about, at least today. our communities don't have the knowledge, right? I can't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with constituents who think that I'm running for Congress, right? And but they don't know that, you know, I impact the state budget, I impact Medicaid, I impact you know, policies as it relates to property valuations or property taxes, right? They don't know that. And so part of what I've been doing, and to get to your question, Sean, directly, is I have to deconstruct how I lead, knowing that historically our communities have been woefully left behind. And in order for me to get my community to a space where they can really see the totality of the problem that we're facing, it requires me as a servant leader to be open and to break down the barriers that have plagued our communities for generations. And so I don't know if, I think sometimes you can get yourself in that's a lot, right? As a leader, right? I think many of you on this call, and Corey even talked about it, you know, you have folks who just don't care, right?
Yeah.
They want change, but they don't necessarily care how it happens. And what I've been trying to communicate to my community, but also just to people who are around me, is that in order for you to see the change you want, your voice has to be a part of this process. And so it's been interesting to see how, in this role as, you know, moving into a state representative, how different of a space it will be to get us on a path collectively where folks feel like their voices are a part of the change that they want to see. And so that's been interesting of a navigation as a leader, but I'm ready for it. So
I love that. I love that so much.
Awesome. That's awesome. Do we have time for another question or what, Sammy?
Yeah. In fact, let's try to get in a couple more, just because I know that there's Corey's got to go soon, but then I feel like there's a lot to unpack here. So let's see if we can get two more in, Sean.
So I'm going to ask sort of two questions. One is, you know, I want to take a look at how you all help people discern stigma versus fact. All right. But then taking that to another layer, especially Addie, I definitely want you to weigh in on this, and the others should chime in as well, is, you know, how can we bring mental health more to the forefront of these issues that we're dealing with? Because it is my belief there's a lot of facts and figures probably, and how certain communities are dealing with their different mental health issues. And I think that might be key to bringing these issues to the forefront and therefore actually solving them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that too. I wonder if we as a collective are really considering our generational trauma, the things that we're carrying with us as we attempt to, you know, blow past what our grandfathers went through, our great grandfathers went through. I often find myself saying in speeches at this point, my God, why am I fighting my grandpa's fight? Like he fought and defended a segregated country. Why am I having the exact same conversation he did when he came home? Why am I having the exact same conversation my dad did? So I want to hear that from you guys too.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to chime in on this one, because I, you know, as a therapist, and I've been a therapist in some space, in some form for the last 4 years, and I think, Stanley, you brought up a great point that can never be underappreciated, and that's the role of generational trauma. And racism is as traumatic as any experience, I would say, that could be felt, because it amplifies a lot of the general anxieties that people already have in general. So racism is what we all go through. Navigating class, trying to, make a living, socially, everything. Now, when you live in a racist, inherently racist state of a union, it makes that generational trauma so much more difficult to navigate and manage through. And I think what's important about trauma is that we really understand. And this is one thing that when I talk with my clients, parents, about understanding trauma, is that it looks different at different stages of people's life. So it manifests different. So if a person who is, let's say, for instance, been sexually assaulted, they may wet the bed at 5, but when they're 15, 16, it manifests different because they're at different developments. The trauma you don't experience it the same. So we have to understand that in this space right now for Black and brown people, and I want to use this opportunity right now to go there, that we are dealing with a lot in this space and time right now. It's difficult to wake up every other day and see one of our brothers and sisters modern day lynched in some form, whether it's at the hands of the state or it's by people or white supremacist racists that are in a lot of ways protected by the state. So it's extremely important to bring up mental health, because I think that is also is a conversation that needs to be continuously had in all departments of power when it comes, or when you can use that power to kill someone. You need to understand what mental health. You need to understand what triggers look like. You need to understand what an anxiety attack looks like. You need to understand the role of PTSD, and you need to give that the same credence to somebody who was impacted by racism or state-sanctioned violence that you would give to credence to someone who may be fighting in war.
If I can just add, I mean, what you said was just one fire. The one thing to layer that to the second question Sean had related to stigma and versus truth.
Missed the question.
One of the things that I find very interesting is that, one, there is and part of it is just because of the racial realities that we've existed in for generations. Mental health is not it's not talked about in homes. In fact, I would say that, and I don't want to get too controversial, but faith is faith and religion can unfortunately cover what is an opportunity to talk about one's mental health.
Bingo.
And so I have these, I do these events in Columbus where I live, and we call them the State of Black Mental Health. And I bring in a bunch of different individuals, therapists, spiritual, everyone you can think of. And the organization I do, the work I do, is actually looking at mental health across the African diaspora and how many cultural traditions that exist within our communities, unfortunately, silence the voices of many of our folks who are in our communities. Yeah. And it was a pretty controversial statement to even be talking about religion as we looking at religion through the lens of our mental health and the stigmas that unfortunately are just prevalent within our community because of it. Not to say that we can't fix it, because we can, but I think it's important to have these very uncomfortable conversations about what is silencing our communities. And are we our own worst enemy in our pursuit to create that or find that truth, right? That truth is, we know that trauma is happening in the homes, not just in the homes, it's happening on the TVs, not just on the TVs, happening in our communities, on the streets. But if we're unable to have those real conversations at our home, where does recovery really happen?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's part of the difficulty that I have seen over a number of sessions we've had in the communities, and really unpacking and unraveling how do we fix it? Because I think we can be our own boundary in trying to find that truth. So,
Dante, before Corey says, I want to say one thing. I think it's also important that we have those conversations with ourselves too, because
100%.
we have to, and we have to, allow those that growth. We can. It's okay to break generational curses daily. Daily, we can start at any time. And, we got to have those uncomfortable conversations about maybe I wasn't doing this the right way, or considering this the right way, or giving it enough, or allowing it enough permission to consider this. So you are exactly right. I just wanted to, to just chime in.
Thank you.
Yep. And to hit on that, sorry, I'm going to be a little fast in my spiel here. I got to jump off right quick. But from the heart, I believe stigma rather than fact. I believe that we can do our best by educating, like we said before. Educating mainly does for the like-minded person, or the common sense person, eliminate stigma. Especially when we get around topics as mental health. I am somebody, as I've aforementioned, someone that struggles with a couple mental health issues. So, I mean, I think that being open about the issues that you face and showing that you still can be a whole, and you are a civilly minded, and you can be a genuine leader in your own respected space while still struggling with these things, can prove to people that it is nothing but stigma when they think in the negative as to why they are struggling with certain things they may be mentally. And I think to add on to that, what I can do as the city level is, as we said, having people that are in these spaces that know what is actually going on in the mental health realm, such as having a mental health advisor on your police staff, for at least one for the day shift, one for the night shift. We see that a lot of people get locked up for reasons due to just mental health reasons. So I do not believe that we should be building more jails. I believe that we should be building more clinics, and we should be expanding education so that we can reach the masses, so that people can eliminate that stigma that they have. I'm jumping off of here. I got to hop on another one. I love all of y'all genuinely. I hope to be in contact with y'all, and please keep up the fight. I know all of y'all will. God bless.
You know it, baby. You know it, brother. You take care, brother.
Thanks, Corey.
Appreciate it. Corey said something, and I want to hear you all's take on this. He was talking about reaching like-minded people. A lot of this fight is with people who are not like-minded people. So I want to hear from you all, sort of, what are your thoughts on trying, even attempting to get not like-minded people on board, and at least open to having dialogue?
Dante, I'm gonna let you go.
Right now. I got a problem. We're gonna have a real conversation, right? I think it requires us to meet people where they are. I think, and there's so many people that are out on the front. Like, one, we all have roles. We all have a part to play. Not everybody's going to be at the policy table. Not everybody's going to be at the streets. Not everybody's going to be in the corporate rooms. Not everybody's going to be at the courthouses as a lawyer or defending individuals who may get arrested because they're protesting. Like, we all have a part to play. And one of the big things that I find hard in our movement is that sometimes those parts that we have designated for ourselves, they conflict with one another. And we can't see the totality of the plan to change our condition and our reality, because we're unfortunately in midst of conflict with one another. And so part of the one thing I do is, when I try to be in all these spaces, because again, as a representative, it's your duty to be in all these spaces. But I also want to say that it's important for me to give space and allow those who are the experts in the room or the experts on the street, have them lead. I want to follow you, right? I want to go where you're going. I want just as much as when I'm in the State House and I need your voice with me, but I'm leading. I want to follow you. And I think we have to have, and there's a statement that was made in light of the election that's currently taking place, and a lot of folks saying that they're not going to vote just because of differences of opinion with Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And an activist said this: we in our communities can sometimes have high ego and low compassion and low empathy. High ego and low empathy. And I think one of the things that is a requirement for us to really exist amongst all these spaces in our pursuit to justice for equity is we got to have empathy of each other, You know, we know that some of our individuals who are on the streets, they're living paycheck to paycheck, unfortunately, right? How can I help support the movement on the ground, right? That may be my role, is helping to bring food to the table, right? Feeding families, feeding individuals, right? That's something I can do, right? So we as a community, in order to really meet people where they are authentically, not just for the photo op, not just for to say that we did it, not just for our own aggrandizement, but authentically reach people, it requires us to have real empathy for each other. And that's something that's hard. I'm not going to say that it's easy. I think a lot of us get these leadership positions because there is a confidence in ourselves. We believe we can lead our people. But as a servant leader, I think it's not, I think, I know, we have to turn that philosophy around and say, at the end of the day, I am blessed to have these individuals vote for me. And so, how can I make sure that whatever I do for them is the most authentic thing I can do to help them succeed in whatever they wish and desire to do? And so, authentic leadership has been, something that I'm just trying to, I think that is going to help us meet people where they are, and actually build a collective movement that all gets us to a place where we want to go.
Yeah. Let me throw in this question from Anne too, because I think that's a great segue, Dontavius. She says here, can we speak to how others, specifically white folks, can help by supporting and fighting for change? I've been extremely vocal on these issues, but I have also been told that I'm not doing anything by trying to white-splain white privilege and Black Lives Matter. I also believe it is right versus wrong. How do you suggest that we can educate and advocate for change without being viewed this way? What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, I think one of the things that that everyone can do is have those private conversations, because I'm a firm believer that, and I'm a firm believer that evidence proves that the most effective form of advertisement is word of mouth, right? So when you're having these conversations, especially with people who genuinely regard you, right, or just want to consider you, I would say they'll listen to you. So that's something that's always pretty much safe. Well, it may not be safe because you may have to cut some people that you love off, but it's safe in the form of not being not being considered doing the right thing as being an ally. But I will say that because of things like trauma, it is difficult for people, for a group of the people who have been neglected by this racist system for so long, who have not even considered their mental health and their traumas and their triggers, because we have been launched in such chaos because some way of this system. And this is not necessarily an excuse to to dismiss someone's good intentions, but I would say it is a reason in contextual evidence to say that sometimes we got to be patient in these spaces, because we're going through a lot, and especially in this time, so it's hard to sometimes distinguish in the moment what is genuine, or what could have been maybe done better, or what is just performative. Because there are, when you see things like performative stuff and you understand what that is, it's easy to it's easy to, well, some people it's identifiable, and that can turn some people off. And but again, at the end of the day, if you know in your heart you're doing the right thing, and the people that truly know you for fighting up and standing up, it's always quality over quantity. It's always quality over quantity. And that's an important thing that I always try to consider.
And I second everything that he said. The one thing I would say, and again, this may become controversial, I'm just gonna say it. It is what it is. White folks need to they need to take ownership of the system, and they need to work damn hard to destroy it. Because I think for me, you know, we are the ones who are constantly on the back end reeling the impact of it, right? And I think it's more than just having conversations. It's about action. Case in point, there
Yes.
every time there is a issue in the boardroom or at the job, you know, there are folks saying some heinous stuff all the time. And you can be in the room and you just listen to it, you hear it, and they think they're comforted by the fact that every person in that room at that time looked like each other. And so they say something that's very heinous, and then you don't speak up, right? That's an action that unfortunately is a domino, because that person's ideology turns into action, and that action could be at the expense of someone who looks like me or folks on this call. And so part of what I believe is important, and I talked about performative individuals who, you know, are just doing it for the clout, essentially, to say that they're an ally. I think that it is important for folks to really take stock in what they're willing to lose for the sake of deconstructing the racial system that exists at the expense of us. And if you're willing to lose, you're willing to lose a job, you're willing to stand out there on the front lines, if you're willing to lose something, I can firmly say that then, you know, you're on the right track. But this is a system that we have inherited. And I don't think it is all on us to deconstruct a system that we are unfortunate victims of. I think it is important to have our white counterpart out there, and in fact, in front, and putting their own bodies on the line to say that we need to deconstruct the system. And so that's what I would say.
I definitely think that there is a component of using your space and your privilege and giving it to your brothers and sisters, to your counterparts, folks that you know that and you see are being oppressed and targeted. The other example I like to use often is the example of hammer eggs. So you hatch eggs, but to have ham, you have to slaughter the pig. Are you willing to be inconvenienced? Are you willing to actually sacrifice? What are you willing to do in this time, in this moment?
Come on now.
So I think that when it comes to our allies, the individuals that genuinely want to extend themselves and do right in this time, it very much has to come from a place of you step back. So as organizations say, you know, step back. There's a moment for you to step up in this time, and that's probably to create that space to push folks back to your brothers and sisters. But when it's time for you to step back, it's true for you to know that this isn't about you right now.
Right.
Your life matters. We got you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely every construct in society reinforces the fact that your life matters. But in so many ways, explicit or implicit, they've made it so that ours are somehow less. It's diminutive, right down to our murders become viral. It's entertainment, porn.
Can I give another example? Because I think what you just said, Sammy, was beautiful. So when we had since when unfortunately George Floyd was assassinated, so I'm going to just say what it was, we had literally constant protests. And we still have protests in many, you know, even now, and here in Columbus. And one of the things that happened, and I give kudos to the organizing community for doing this. They put all of the white individuals who were there to support on the front lines with shields. And it was almost three back. It was like three rows of white individuals and then the black people, right? And it was like the chant was, we need to, every time the police came around, it was a row of white individuals who would encircle the black community and say, we need to protect them, right? And so, again, I give 100% kudos to the organizing teams that are on the ground still to this day doing the work. But that's what I mean, right? Putting your own body on the line, protecting, knowing that the system doesn't protect us. You're willing to protect us in that moment, because that is a visceral reality that we experience that day in and day out with the police. And you're out there putting yourselves on the line to ensure that we can, move forward through our protests.
We'll wrap our
that's what's required.
Right there.
That's what's required.
Gentlemen, I'm honored that you shared your time with us this evening and me. And I felt that it was so important to lift up your voices in this particular moment. I want you to know that I very much stand in solidarity with you. I lived this experience. Yeah. Go ahead, Adam.
May I say one thing? Yeah, I just have to just say one thing before we close, and I am so glad. I want to thank you guys, all of you guys, that has been so helpful personally. But there is, it's coming. This racism is as dangerous as anything we've seen. And if we know anything about our history or study anything about history, we can see how there's a newness in this time, but these things are not new. And what could be possible to come, and what looks like what's coming, this movement into a fascist state. It's here. Hyper nationalism. This acquiescent belief in completely, militarizing the state, this military spending expansively, all the way down to small police departments. We are headed to a scary, dangerous time. And it is a time where we all have to pick a choice for right and wrong. And if everyone who is standing on the vanguard right now, on the forefronts, is murdered or arrested and jailed, the fascist state will come for you if you do not stand up for the good fight. It's a scary time where we're coming, and it is a time to it's never more imperative to stand up for human rights, I believe.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Addie.
Oh,
that's it for me. I'm sorry, I'm done talking. I'm done.
No, you're good.
That's good.
Thank you. And I want you guys to know that sorry about the feedback. This moment right now, I do feel is pivotal. And the reason that we're having this conversation is because it's one of those that we have to talk about head on, and all the facets that are showing up right now, whether it's attempting to lead or navigating space that, quite frankly, there is no around, it's only through. And we're at that impact. And we just happen to be young Black leaders at this time. So it's your space to be empowered, but it's also your space to speak your truth. And I really want to thank you for doing that this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. I got Tina and I got Dora. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So I wanted to bring you two on in particular because right now we are at a moment. Both of you are running for office. Yes. Both of you are running beautiful campaigns. Yes, I creep on them. But you know, like I know, that we're very much in a time that's heated, it's divisive. And when it comes to leadership, the first place that some of these folks like to go is right towards women of color. And so now that you're building your platforms and you're asking for folks to buy into your leadership, I wanted to be able to have this conversation with you of how you're navigating. how you're trying to create that conversation around anti-racism. But in both of your spaces, I'm very familiar with both of your districts. Neither one of them is particularly super woke right now, right? Like it's very combustible spaces. So how are we buying in? How are we gaining voters? How are we gaining ground, but still very much lending ourselves to our principles? That said, and that being top of mind, go ahead and introduce yourselves, ladies. And Dora, can we start with you because I'm excited to have you here.
No problem. So thank you, for having me. I definitely appreciate the opportunity. To everyone that's watching, I'm glad you're tuning in. My name is Dora Drake, and I'm running for state assembly in District 11 in Wisconsin, which is going to be in Milwaukee. And I don't know if you guys have been following the news, but Kenosha, which is about 45 minutes away from Milwaukee, is under a lot of heat right now due to another officer-involved shooting. And today, the news of a 17-year-old white boy that allegedly, I should say, killed 2 people and injured one with an assault rifle. So, when you speak, Sammy, about what it means to not only run for office, but what it looks like for women, especially Black women in leadership, I have to be honest to go back, I actually have a background in activism. So when I was in college at Marquette, I was a student activist, especially when Black Lives Matter first started with Ferguson and Trayvon Martin, and then Dontre Hamilton here in our own city. And so, I struggled with that just because I know that sometimes it can be perceived that people that are running for office or in leadership can, quote unquote, walk or participate in protests to, say, oh, well, I've done this, and it's just a photo op. So I was very conflicted about how to navigate that space. Is because the one thing that I want to stay true, to running for office was, one, as a social worker in the justice system, I've seen people lose hope in so many different areas, and it just trickles into what we're seeing in politics. So I want to maintain that, but maintain my integrity as well, just because so much of that, I believe, is being lost when it comes to politics today. Now, I know that in the art of politics, there are some compromises here and there, but it should never come to the point of using community members, quote unquote, as pawns for political power. And that's where I've always stood on that. So navigating through that, and thankfully, actually, for the district I'm running in, it's pretty Democrat, in terms of people are aware of the issues. But I do have some residents that I've met with that have differing opinions. And so how I've navigated that space is, one, I always seek to understand, because if I try to understand, I can get to the root of what the real issue is. Because I think, especially when it comes to issues that affect us so personally, when it's police brutality or lack of education for our kids, to housing and redlining, like that stuff that's personal because there's a history of that and there's a pain that's real. And at times we may try to push it away just so we can stay focused on either campaigning or trying to look at the bigger picture to get legislation passed. But in that, at some point you always have to come back to your why and realize, okay, the reason why I'm doing this is not for me. It's not for the next move. It's because people are hurting and change needs to happen. So, I do have those honest conversations, and they're difficult. I have people that don't agree with what's happening, that have very strong opinions about what's currently happening, not only here in our city or the nation as a whole, but I always let them know where I stand with truthfully, but I don't want to say come at their character, but I respect their humanity, if that makes sense. It's because don't get me wrong, like there are always times where we have to say this is wrong and you should stand by that. Like you need to speak truth to power. And I understand the concept of that, as well as the emotional toll it takes of protesters that are on the front line, honestly doing the work. Me and Tina that are running for office, we're just the catalysts, of the people and pushing what they want. And so we're, in a way, strategists on how to push what's currently happening. And so I think we're in a unique time where we can say, hey, this is what's happening in our cities, our nation. We need to push this in legislation. Otherwise, it's going to get more crazy. There's probably going to be more protests. And when it comes to businesses, obviously a lot of the discussion of looting and rioting has come up when it comes to property damage. And my thoughts on it are, I understand it. But at the same time, when it comes to us trying to get economic wealth, with home ownership and Black businesses, that's when we can use that and say, hey, if you want to make sure that your business doesn't get burned down, you're going to have to sort of come up to speed and see, do you have diverse hiring managers? What does your staff look like? Are you intentionally preventing people to come into certain neighborhoods for home ownership, or are you fixating it at a higher rate? So we're in an interesting time where we can definitely push for some of those things to actually be dealt with. But at the same time, navigating it's new territory. None of us have lived through a pandemic, and yes, there have been racial tensions, but not to this extent, especially with the murder of George Floyd and then Breonna Taylor and so many other names.
Yeah.
So in a way, there really is no guide for this except realizing and staying true to what your why is and making sure that you keep that, as you go through the campaign trail and, in leadership, if Tina and I both are elected, and hopefully we will be.
I love this. Tina Gray Russell.
Hello, I am Tina Gray Russell. I am running for House of Delegates here in Mercer County. I was in the Army for 9 years, served in Operation Desert Storm, social worker for 25 years. Me and Sammy go back some activism time too. So, and it's nice to meet you, Dora, and I wish you success. It's always great to see you run. I always tell people, run, run, run.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the change starts, with us running. Whether we think we're going to win or not, we got to start somewhere. So yeah. I'm thrilled that you ladies are running. One of the things too that concerns me about this moment is I have to give a shout out to James Baldwin when he said, "How much time do you want?
How much
for your progress?"
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
I feel like we're at that moment where they're out of time. We got to have change now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't wait any longer. But it's basically like a geyser that has just been dormant for a certain period of time. For a little moment there, I think we got into a sense of I'm gonna say a sense of complacency. I loved when Obama won. I'm not gonna deny that. But I think we thought things were gonna be okay, and we took our eye off the ball on some things.
Mm-hmm.
I think these things were always there. I think this was always like a pressure cooker that was just waiting till its moment to explode. I feel like that. I feel like that's the best analogy I can use. When everybody tells me I can't believe how bad it is right now, I always tell people this was always there. It just feels like it has the power to show itself right now. Mm-hmm. It was always there.
Yes.
We know it was.
Yeah.
And I think we're at a pivotal moment where everybody's going to have to think back, especially to this year. Something about 2020, man. Like every day you wake up and you go, all right, what you gonna test me with today?
What is it today? Yeah,
pretty much.
What's my mission today? How you gonna use me today? Mm-hmm. Get ready. There's something coming.
Right.
Yeah. But I think what this is this is the moment when people are truly going to have to choose whether they gonna stand or step aside. You've got two choices, and that's the only two choices you have. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're going to stand with us, or you're going to step aside.
Yes.
You really can't be complicit right now. That does us no good right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's no side, right? Like at this point, because of this, wild combination of circumstances that we get to lead in right now, right, ladies? So we have all of these extenuating circumstances. We have all these additional factors. And when you combine them, it's literally stripped away every veneer that we've been hiding behind. And so that underbelly the very vulnerable underbelly that we thought was reserved for a certain faction of the community, and it was so safe with marginalized communities, communities of color, poorer communities, all of those seem to make it a little bit easier and palatable to just brush it aside. But now everyone's feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone.
Yeah.
They're even.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think I got complacent too, though. I really do. I think there was a time there in my life when I thought I'll show up to vote, pay my taxes, work a job. I'm doing my part.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I learned, I'm sorry, that's not enough.
Yeah.
I wish it was. I wish it was enough. I wish that was enough, but it ain't enough. Because, and whenever I try to talk to my white brothers and sisters, and I consider everybody my brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
I feel like we all have to start seeing ourselves that way.
Yeah.
Even though we are dealing with some tough times here, and there's real systemic racism, make no mistake about it. I still believe we have to find a way to be here again. We have to find it. It may take a long time, but we can't stop fighting for that. That's what even with people who we disagree with vehemently, we have to keep those lines of communication open. Doesn't mean we have to take it, but we have to be willing to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And like we're doing right now.
For both of you, let me ask you this.
Okay.
Knowing that we are women of color and there are a number of issues that we constantly have to fight to have at the forefront and to just get their due diligence, whether there's the so-called women's issue, although I would argue that they're actually public health issues, but that's neither here nor there. But when you have these, plus the additional factors of systemic racism, when we're also trying to go after economic justice, environmental justice, reform, how do you bring that all together? How do you come forward with intersectional policy to make sure that you're being true to those values?
Mm-hmm. Tina, do you want to go or
you can go, Dora? Yeah.
So as my time as a social worker in the justice system, I worked with a variety of people, mainly people of color, but also, poor individuals, white individuals. And if you listen to the stories enough, you'll see that there's commonalities. So an example, we talk about access of quality education, right? So obviously cities that obviously there's a larger capacity, so they're always asking for funds. But then if you also look in rural areas, there's the lack of access is just the same. It's just different in terms of how it's the issue is portrayed. So how I try to go about it that still advocates, pushes for things that we need is the commonalities and say, hey, we both agree that one, every child should get quality education, no doubt. I'm pretty sure we can work on not only getting that for every child, but especially leveling the playing field that for communities that have been intentionally disenfranchised for so many years. And again, with everything that's happening, and Tina said it best, you're gonna have to choose at this point, one way or another, where you stand.
Mm-hmm.
We can use that to our advantage and say, you know what, we cool, I love you, and I care for you as a person, but this is what it is, and we need to get this together. Otherwise, we're not going to be doing so good,
The history books will be written about 2020. We'll be in our little wheelchairs and we'll know what side we were on.
Right. Exactly.
I'm just saying. I mean, people have to think about that. You got to start thinking about legacy too, man. Mm-hmm. How do you want to be remembered in those history books? Yep. Did you stand up or did you step aside?
Yep.
Absolutely.
And one thing.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead, honey.
Oh, I was just going to say to the last point, I think, in terms of us getting complacent too, well, one, in terms of how I would address things, I would try to find the commonality to say, hey, we are really fighting for the same thing. I don't know why there's this purposeful division that doesn't need to be there. But I will say too, what's easy for me personally was to get jaded. So I saw how things were, not only in the city, but because I also served as a campaign manager for a school board race last year. And what I saw disturbs me so much to where I didn't want to be part of it, because I'm just like, this is not what needs to be happening. But once you see it enough, eventually you have to say enough is enough. And so I think some people got complacent. I think a lot of people got jaded and honestly just don't believe in it anymore. Yeah. And so I think part of addressing getting people engaged to continue to fight for what we're doing is let them know there are people that are actively trying to push good work to get things done. But yeah, for your answer, Sammy, I would just say you have to find the commonalities and let people know, hey, we in the same team. You know, I understand the needs that you may be advocating for, but at the same time, it can't be a one-way street anymore, and we're not allowing it.
I'm with you. I love that.
I think from my experience as a social worker as well for 25 years,
Mm-hmm.
I did a lot of in-home visits, hundreds of them probably over the years. I would walk into homes where, you know, there may be a Confederate flag on every wall in that house. I'm just being straight with you.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be honest, I'm looking for exits a little bit. Because I don't know how this is going to go. Not trying to mess with y'all. But I'm just being honest here, man. First, you don't know how to take that. You see a lot of them. So you see that. And, you know, your first instinct as a Black person is to be afraid. That's your first instinct. It is. And then I'll be shocked and surprised that that person will sit there and talk to me for 3 hours.
Yeah.
Offer me a cup of coffee. And then when we get to knowing each other and I get to asking them questions about it and they'll eventually I've even had them ask me, does this bother you? And you know, I never lie. I said, yes, sir, it does. You know? And he goes, well, why does it bother you? It's just about Southern heritage. I said, well, sir, you know, and this was one of the families I worked with for over a year. We ended up bonding, but it took a long time. It takes a long time for change to come with different situations. And the reason I bring this up is I think it does relate to intersectionality, because what it is you have to find a way to get into uncomfortable spaces with people. They see the world from a different perspective from you, and you may realize you have some things in common, but you got to find a way to talk to them first. Doesn't always work. But in this situation, when I was honest with him and I said, for me as a person who's Black, it makes me feel pain. And he didn't understand why. And I said, because in my mind, what I go to is somewhere in history, there was a Black man, or woman, or child, I don't know, who may have been lynched, and that might have been the last thing they saw. That's how painful that is for me. In my history, that probably happened. That might have been the last symbol they saw before they left this earth. So for us, it's a painful symbol. It represents something that causes us pain because we know it caused our ancestors pain.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, and he just looked at me and said, well, I never really thought about that. And sometimes they don't. And we got to be careful not to be too quick to label them racist and no good and shove them aside. Some people you can reach some, but we have to find that intersectionality. We have to find some way to express our pain without attacking each other.
I'm with you. I can hear that. And I think a lot of that comes down to us being, I mean, truly, it is us being mentally tough enough to take a step back and be able to establish that space, give it the space it deserves in that conversation, but then also harking back to that point, and then also talking about allyship in general. Well, for our counterparts of non-color, that was the opportunity for you to step back and listen. That was your opportunity. That was the best thing that you could do as an ally in that moment. Not question us, not tell us we're wrong for feeling that way, or having a very real and visceral reaction to these symbols. Mm-hmm. It's not for you to diminish that moment. It's for you to sit back and listen to how someone else felt. Let me give you guys one more question to wrap up our ladies candidate segment. And I really loved this statement when it came out in this conversation about building hope. How are you going to build hope in this moment?
Tina, do you want to tackle this?
I'll let you go first. You go first.
Okay. So personally, what I've seen, and just even my personal life too, there have been times where, quite honestly, on the campaign trail, I let people know I've worked several jobs, to make ends meet. I've had a family member almost, I guess, swindled to saying they had a bag of weed and almost arrested by the police up in North Wisconsin, where I couldn't do anything. To just working in the justice system and seeing what's been happening in my own community, I boil down what I've heard and what I personally have learned is that to build hope, you have to let people find their own talent, but giving them that avenue to actually do that. And so, it's great that we're here talking about the issues we face as Black women, what we need as a country and nation. But so many people are so fed up with talk at this point, and we see it, from the protests to people not caring anymore, but like voting doesn't matter anymore. I've had those conversations to not even doing the census, which gets money to our cities and our communities for building what we want. And how I envision building hope is one that there's actual tangible change that you can see. And so intangible change, that means, as a legislator, that's passing legislation that addresses the things that we see day to day, but also on, I guess, communications front, people being able to see, in COVID, it's weird because a lot of things is virtual now and people are missing that touch. So, mental health is going to be a huge part of that. But giving people the space to actualize what their talents are and knowing that they can actually create a life with that is because it's, there's the proverb where you can keep giving man fish, but, to teach them to fish, they're going to obviously be able to do so much more for themselves and they feel better about themselves. So moving forward in terms of building hope, it's getting people to actualize their own talents, realizing that and knowing that they can do so much more with that, but letting them see from the work I do and who I work with to bring tangible change and legislation that people can see in a day-to-day lives. Because if you ask any other person that's really not into politics or media or any of this, they're like, I'm just trying to get food on the table. I'm gonna have to choose between paying rent or paying food for my child. I don't have internet for my kids. I'm at home and I'm in an abusive relationship and I don't know where to go to, I'm just so tired of being a Black man, a Black woman. What's the point? And in my campaign and what I strive to do with anything I've done as a social worker, as an activist, and currently as a candidate, that everything that I do is meaningful and that there's a purpose and a vision for it. And so the more people that are coming on board, that have a vision, that have a plan, that still stay true to why they're doing it, is how we can maintain to that. Because it's hard, especially I know in Milwaukee, in Kenosha, a lot of people are upset. If I'm honest, what's been happening there has been consuming my mind all day, in terms of, how do you navigate this space and still trying to not diminish anyone's voice, but try to understand everyone as a whole, because that's your role as a legislator. At the end of the day, you're not going to police everyone, but knowing that if it's actual change that's being effective and people can see it day to day, that's when people can be like, you know what, this can actually be better for me. I actually believe again that things can be better for me in my situation. And I want to get involved and see how I can keep pushing forward to see what I can do. And what's that person's talent, their gifts, and they're putting in their resources, we're going to be in a much better space to move forward. And I think that's building hope really is collective at the end of the day.
I think when I think about hope, I can't help but think about little Ruby Bridges. Back in the city. Remember little Ruby? Yeah. She was in that school, and she would get those taunts every day. First year of school, she was the only student, and one teacher stayed to help and teach her for an entire year because they refused to go to school with her. And I remember reading the story of Ruby Bridges when I was young, and I think what shocked me was how much hope she had, even as a child. And when children are hopeful, though, that's a wonderful quality about children, that they tend to have an innate goodness, you know. But for her in that situation where they were yelling all kinds of crazy things at her and threats and stuff, for her to say she still prayed for them every day, that to me is the ultimate sign of a person who shows an ability to have hope in a situation that seemed hopeless, you know. And when I look for inspiration and I think about the times we're going through, and we're going through some tough times, make no mistake about it, Wisconsin is weighing heavy on my heart with everyone else, but I believe that somehow we're going to come out of this stronger, and I believe in hope. I think hope is our most powerful weapon that we have. I do believe that. I believe that one of the things that we have to be resonant in is we have to follow hope with action, and it has to be consistent. But let's just say, for argument's sake, we win our elections. Let's just say we win. Doesn't it feel good to even think about it? But let's say we all win. We're there together. We're singing Kumbaya and everything's great. That's not when the work ends. That's when the work begins.
Exactly.
That's the thing we need to remember. I think, like I said, when Obama won, I think the complacency came in. We thought the work was done and didn't realize the work was just beginning. And we have to remember that even if we get everything we want, and these elections turn out and change happens and things seem to be going in the right direction, we have to maintain the action that came with the hope. Even if we get what we want, we have to keep doing the work. Hope is not a good tool without work that goes behind it. And I think that's the thing that I've learned is no matter how good things turn out, you got to keep doing the work. What John Lewis says, good trouble. Necessary trouble.
I'm so proud of you both. I can't stress that enough. And I'm proud to have you on. It means a lot for you to be able to share your perspective on this in particular. And just from me to you, know that I have absolute faith in you because I do know that you are made for this work. So
well, we appreciate you, Sammy. I've seen you on the floor, girl. You keep fighting for us. We're proud of you.
You got to raise a little hell. You know what I mean? I love you guys. Thank you so much. And, go make some trouble.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Sarah. Bring Sean.
A lot of people would probably like it if I would stay muted.
I know. What's going on?
Well, we're still live, and so just thought, close it out.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I had chills thinking about Ruby Bridges and how we need to take that struggle she led and take it home to victory.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was just a very powerful thing to visualize from that classroom with one teacher and one student to where we could be today.
A lot of the that I'll just pull from today really came down to the fact that there is a very real risk in doing this work right now, particularly as a person of color. And we see this, and I think that there's this idea that being a politician right now is some type of a cushy job, the corruption, the cash, and
we only work 60 days a year,
and but
right.
But the way that we've approached this work, and particularly at the levels that we brought on today, we're so closely connected to our communities, and then to see them right now feel the divisiveness and actually physically experience this, we know more than the average bear of what's going on in this movement space. And that's why it was so important to have this conversation, even though it did go over a bit. I'll tell you this. It was worth it. I'll tell you this. Friday was a moment for me. We went to our Unity rally in Berkeley Springs, and I think that I was supposed to be a politician in that moment. I think I was supposed to get on stage and say the words and do the things, and I couldn't. It's very much in that moment where I knew that my lot was to be something else, to be someone else. And it was very much about protecting the folks that were there. It's a scary thing to tell you that we had actually risked our well-being to be at an action to really speak to unifying a community. But it also made it very real to me that we're past those types of actions. We're now in a place where we have to be very proactive. We are going to be in the most painful part of this transition. But like Jennifer Wells had said in the beginning of this conversation, this is our third iteration. This is the one where we come through, and maybe this time we get it right. We've truly dismantled the oppression. So that said, thank you, Sarah, for always producing this show. And I want to.
You're welcome. And I just have to, though, let everyone know, I watched you speak before the Fairmont City Council last night, and I just, I wish I was just cheering for all of you who went up there and spoke in support of Delegate Danielle Walker, and spoke against the hateful commentary that the councilman said on his social media, and apparently verbally as well. So thank you for I know Delegate Eastep Burton was there, and several other people were there. And then, it was a powerful evening.
I think it's one of those you acknowledge that there's so much in this moment that we can't let that go. It's that type of rhetoric that actually incites the violence. It's happening. It's their call to action to begin at this point. And so we can't stand by and say, oh, it's just some guy talking trash. That's not what's happening. It's the red flag, bringing people in to be a part of this violence and this divisiveness, and ultimately change the course here. So that's our work. That's our charge right now. I think this is all at a fever pitch. And the reason that we brought this conversation forward in particular, and why I was really called to bring this on the page today, because it could have waited, I suppose. But I know that this is happening rapidly. I know that we have not yet found justice. I know that there are places that are seeing so much more volatility, and it will not stop until we stand up and speak out.
Absolutely. And I just want to say to Anne Marie, she was asking some really great questions. And I think she was basically asking, how can we as white privileged people advocate on behalf of this movement? And I think one of the things that is really important is, and we said this the other night, is see something, you say something. You got to be willing to approach anyone and everyone that is saying anything that is disrespectful, that is racist, and say, this will not be tolerated. You will not speak that way anymore. Not around me, not around my children, not around my community. And you have to be willing to take that step forward. And I've done this, so it's painful. You have to be able to look back and say, wow, I was pretty insensitive and racist on occasions. I probably didn't think of it. I was just ignorant, but you have to be willing to learn. So now I know I'm turning this conversation a little bit, but I do want to remind everybody that your event, you have a very special event on Friday, count 2 days from now, and that is that the wonderful folks from Broadway's Jeanette, which is the story of the first elected woman to Congress, Jeanette Rankin. And they are going to do a virtual fundraiser for you, and tickets are available at sammybrown.org/events. And you can go on there and get your ticket and join the fun on Friday and support Sammy's campaign for re-election and for her to continue the good work, not just in the State House, but in the community. So I just had to put that pitch out there.
Close it out.
All right. Well, on that end, we'll bid you farewell.
Night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.